Hey everyone, thanks for being here today and for listening to this lecture on trademarks. We're going to do a deep dive on how to register a trademark and to explain what trademarks are and how they're different from copyrights. I'm going to be using my own moniker, which is Cellista, as an example of how I went about the process of registering and enforcing the trademark. I'm really excited to share all this information with you. It can feel a little daunting, but all in all, it's something that helps protect creatives' identity. So first off, trademarks are a way to distinguish yourself in the marketplace. So as I said, I feel like I have my own distinct brand happening and I wanted to protect that. So I'm Cellista, I'm an aerial cellist, and I use trademarks to protect myself. So first off, what is a trademark? So when I first started building my career, I wanted a way to protect my identity as a performer. So that's where trademarks came in. So let's just start with the basic. A trademark is anything that distinguishes your work, like a name, a logo, or even a slogan. And for musicians, trademarks are essential for building a recognizable identity. So think of the impact of names like the Beatles or logos like Prince's love symbol. Trademarks allow your audience to know it's you. So here's a case study on my own name, on my own moniker. When I chose to trademark Cellista, it was about more than just protecting a name. It was about securing my identity as an artist. The name represents everything I bring to the table: artistry, innovation, and a fusion of classical and contemporary styles. So by trademarking Cellista, I ensured that it remains exclusively mine to use in performance. So there are different types of trademarks for musicians. They come in a few forms and you might use several types, in fact. For example, your name or band name could be trademarked as a word mark. Your logo as like a symbol or the artwork on your album, it's a design mark. And some even trademark sound marks, a distinct musical phrase that becomes associated with them. For me, Cellista is both a word mark and when I go for it, when I decide to, it can be a combination mark if I pair it with a logo. So the process of trademarking isn't as complicated as it seems. It does take a lot of organization and a lot of follow-up. But to begin, I first used the USPTO database to make sure no one was using Cellista. I filed an application showing how I was using the name in commerce, like on, if you wanted to, again, with a logo, like on concert posters or social media. And finally, I've used Cellista and I've continued to use Cellista consistently to maintain my rights. So this is just going over the USPTO website where I first began. And so you go here and then you can do a search for, so I searched for Cellista and you can see that there were 1,900 results for Cellista. This shows the kind of the history of the trademarking process, from first filing for that name in 2000. The filing date was in 2015 and then the registration date in 2016. So you can see it's still in service and has been registered with the office. If you're ready to protect your brand, like I was saying, you first search your name on TAS, the USPTO's database, to make sure it's available. Then file your application online, showing you're using it in commerce, and make sure you continue to use your trademark actively. So don't forget to renew it when it's needed. And there are a few things I learned as I went through. So this shows like half of the documentation work that had to go through the office. They required something called specimens, so I took screenshots of my website and I think a few flyers and posters to prove that I was using the mark in commerce. As you can see, it finally went through, registered on October 25th, 2016. It's under Class 41, which is entertainment services in the nature of live musical performances, motion picture song production, music production services, and songwriting services for non-advertising purposes. Shows that the mark was first used in August of 2011. The mark consists of standard characters, so it doesn't have any claim to like a particular font, a size, or color, and it identifies me as the owner. And there's a lot of benefits to this. I mean, it's been invaluable to me. It gives me brand recognition. They associate Cellista with my unique sound and style. I work hard on my branding. It provides legal protection. I have the tools to prevent misuse of my name, and it's professionalism. It's just signaling to collaborators and audiences that I'm serious about my work. And you might have a couple of questions about the difference between trademark and copyright. So when I was starting, I was also confused. It wasn't clear to me at the time what it meant, but here's what I've learned. Trademarks, they protect things like my name and my logo. Copyrights, they protect the creative works I make, like my compositions and performance videos. And how do they work together? Here's a good example. For example, my name Cellista is trademarked, but my music and recordings are protected by copyright, which we discussed earlier the last time I lectured. And this just does a little overview again of registering for a trademark. So if you're thinking about doing it yourself, here's a little snapshot again. You can search your name on the USPTO's database. You can apply and file your application online. Make sure that you're using your trademark, doing it on posters, albums, have enough specimens. They're evidence that you're using it in commerce. Renew it, keep it active by proving continued use. This is representing you to a market. And I have an activity for you. Try searching your own name or band's name on TESS and see if it's available. Plus, once I had it trademarked, I realized the work wasn't done because now I have to keep it safe. I have to police my brand. So I enforce my rights. So if someone else uses Cellista and I see it within the United States, because it is a domestic trademark, I act on it. And I have to send a cease and desist. I stay unique. I'm careful to not let the name become generic. So that's unlikely in my case, but a good example of that might be Kleenex. That's something that could go generic or has gone generic. And also, you should think globally. So if I begin to expand internationally, I will probably think about pursuing international trademark, which can be expensive. So it's an extra layer of cost, but it's also an extra layer of protection. These are some resources that I've used that I found really helpful. You're always welcome to ask me how I navigated this process with my moniker Cellista. But to wrap up, I just want to say that trademarks are a really powerful way to protect your identity and build your brand as a musician. Start thinking about how you can distinguish yourself in your field. Think about who you are in the field, what makes you special, unique, different, what sets you apart, and start building from there. And don't be afraid to take that first step, maybe just with that search, in protecting your work. Thanks so much for listening. It's a pleasure to lecture on trademarks. When I first thought about trademarking my moniker, Cellista, I had no idea what I was doing, and I had to literally figure things out on my own. I remember it being really confusing and really daunting. I had no business background, and it just felt scary to even have to figure it out. And there was not a lot of help for me to figure it out. There weren't that many musicians around me in the Bay Area where I was living at the time who could point me in the right direction. So it was one big scary adventure. I started using the moniker Cellista ages ago, back in the day when there was a platform called, I don't even want to say it because no one knows it because it's so old, but it was called LiveJournal, and my handle was Cellista. So that was years ago. At some point, I started playing professionally and I started playing with bands. And all bands have a name, right? It's not just their first name, it's not just their last name, it's like something, I don't know, it could be anything, but I was playing for a band called Do-I, and I think it was through that work, that non-traditional work as a cellist, that I became aware of branding and marketing and telling people who you are through logos, through names, and through presentations. For me as a classical musician, as a classical cellist, this felt like a revelation, to be honest. And I started thinking about myself as a solo cellist, or a cellist who had a name, who had some recognition, and who could be identified as Cellista. So I started going by that name. I went by it for, in the Bay Area, working just a couple of years. And it suddenly dawned on me that maybe I want to protect this name, right? I don't want other people using the Cellista name when I've been carving out this cool market for myself, playing cello in unorthodox spaces, in unorthodox ways, and with unorthodox people. So I began the process of trademarking. And as I said before, there weren't a lot of people to ask questions. But I did start asking questions, and eventually I found myself just on the website of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And there were a lot of answers to be found there. I just wanted to say, as a musician, there's going to be a lot of times when things feel unknown and they feel scary, and you have to ask questions, and sometimes the answers you get are not the right answers. But I just want to encourage you to continue moving forward and have a sense of curiosity and adventure in your career, and don't be afraid to not know. For me, I didn't know a lot of things, and it just took figuring stuff out, like trying things once or twice, even failing. Fail as often as you can. And it took failing to kind of figure out the trademark thing, and a lot of other stuff as well. But once I had the keys to trademarking, I felt like I had the keys to a lot of other things as well, including copyright. So in so many instances of these registration processes, it's just admin heavy. There's a lot of administration. And so what that means for you as a creative is that you need to be as organized and disciplined as possible in your professional music making, and you'll be well on your way to doing things the way you should. For me, I've always been pretty organized, cared a lot more about planning and administration than a lot of my colleagues. So the things I needed to register my trademark, I had them ready, like the specimens, so just the examples of using my logo in commerce, the evidence of its history being used in commerce. I had all of that ready. So I highly encourage you to always, when I say be organized, be disciplined, I think it means also document your work. If not for you, then for other people, but it's an archival thing. As a musician, as a small business owner, which you are as a musician, you just have to be organized. I do remember one choice I made that really benefited me was I had a tremendous amount of administrative work going on for myself, and I was doing it all by myself in my apartment and feeling incredibly overwhelmed, and I just didn't know how to get through it. And as working musicians, as creatives, you all know the amount of transactions we have, the amount of people we interact with all the time and daily is huge. So what I managed to do was get myself a sponsored co-working space at a place called Next Space, which was in San Jose at the time. And basically I negotiated, because I couldn't afford the monthly fee, but I did negotiate that every Friday, I think, I would play on their happy hour, and in exchange I got office space. It ended up being a really beneficial thing for me because I got to work with small business owners. So yeah, they weren't musicians, they weren't in the arts by any means, but so many of the conversations that they had were similar to the ones I needed to be having with clients, with colleagues, etc. It turned out to be such a boost also to my network, and also I'd sometimes get hired after hanging out with these people. So finding a space where you can work, where you're with people who are operating business but maybe in a different discipline, is really, really helpful. That's when you get to ask questions about all kinds of things that you might not get the answers to with other musicians. There's some things that are difficult about trademarking, and of course, one would be policing your mark. So you do have to do regular searches online to make sure that no other person is using your mark in that class as yours. Otherwise, it looks like you've allowed it to just fall by the wayside and you risk losing your trademark. For me, it's difficult in that you're having to send like a cease and desist letter to people you don't know. But if you don't do that, you're going to lose your mark. And it's a hard thing, but it is at some point business. It's just business. It's just a way of protecting yourself and them for that matter. And especially the consumer who wants to know which, they don't want to be choosing between different Cellistas. They want to know who that Cellista is, right? So it's a hard thing, but it's also very important. Another thing that surprised me about both the copyright and trademark process was that you will eventually end up talking to someone on the phone who is probably in Washington, D.C. trying to file your trademark or your copyright. And it's interesting because it gets so buried in paperwork that it can feel really like distant and overwhelming. But the truth is there is someone there who's going through your stuff, who's reviewing the specimens to make sure that they're right, that's making sure that you're not infringing on someone else's mark. So I don't know, it's a little bit of the human side of registration. I think trademark, copyright, all these things, they feel overwhelming, of course, but they do ask you to define yourself in a very oversaturated marketplace. You have to stand out as a musician, as a small business owner. You have to differentiate yourself. Trademarking asks you to do this right off the get-go. How are you different from other people? How are you different from other people in your industry? Where do you think you're headed? Where do you think you're going to go? Trademarking, branding, that kind of thing, it's just self-definition. I think it's a really healthy thing to spend time doing, to think about. So even if you don't trademark today, your band name or your whatever you might have coming up, it's still probably good to do a little self-introspection and think about, who am I? Who am I in this market? Who wants to hire me? Who wants to hear me? Who wants to be next to me? What makes me special? Why am I here? The ultimate philosophical question. So I think trademarking offers us to do a little deep dive into identity, which can be pretty fun, I think.